The call came in the middle of a negotiation, guns on the table, men holding their breath, and the Mafia boss ready to end a war with a single word. His phone buzzed. A tiny voice, shaking, broken, whispered into his ear, "Sir, please come. Daddy is beating Mommy. I don't know what to do." The room went silent. He dismissed his men with a hand gesture, his pulse suddenly pounding in a way gunfights never triggered. "Sweetheart, who are you? How did you get this number?" The girl sniffled. "You don't know me, but Mommy said you're the only person who can save her." The line clicked off. He stared at the phone, a name appearing briefly before the call dropped, a name he hadn't heard in years, a woman from his past, a wound he never closed. He was out the door in seconds. 8 minutes later, he turned into a quiet neighborhood. Too quiet. Lights off. No movement. Not even the dog barking. Then he heard it. A crash. A scream. A child's voice begging behind a thin apartment wall. He kicked the door open and froze, because the daddy the little girl was talking about was not the man he expected. Not a drunk. Not a stranger. It was someone the Mafia boss knew. Someone he once trusted. Someone who should have never been near that woman or her daughter. And the little girl, standing in the hallway barefoot and shaking, looked up at him with terrified eyes and whispered, "You came. Mommy said you always keep your promises." His world tilted, because he had made a promise a lifetime ago, and tonight he would finally learn why that woman disappeared from his life, and why her daughter had his eyes. Stay with me until the end, because what he discovers in that apartment will rewrite everything he thought he knew about loyalty, love, and the family he never knew he had. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. Dominic Torino had built his empire on 3 unbreakable rules. Never show weakness, never trust anyone completely, and never let emotions cloud business decisions. These rules had kept him alive for 20 years, in a world where sentiment got you killed and hesitation meant a bullet between the eyes. But tonight, all 3 rules shattered the moment he heard that little girl's voice. The apartment building stood like a forgotten monument in the shadows of downtown Detroit. Cracked windows stared down at him like dead eyes, and the smell of desperation hung thick in the October air. This wasn't the kind of neighborhood where a man like Dominic usually found himself. His world existed in marble penthouses and private clubs, in boardrooms where million-dollar deals were sealed with handshakes that carried more weight than signed contracts. Yet here he was, standing before apartment 3B with his heart hammering against his ribs like it hadn't done since his first kill 23 years ago. The hallway reeked of stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sickly shadows that danced across peeling wallpaper. From behind the thin walls, he could hear the sounds of other people's misery, a television blaring infomercials, a baby crying, an old man coughing his life away one breath at a time. But from apartment 3B came something that made Dominic's blood turn to ice. The unmistakable sound of flesh meeting flesh, a woman's muffled cry, and underneath it all, the quiet whimpering of a terrified child. Dominic pressed his ear against the door, his trained senses cataloging every sound. 3 people inside. 1 man, heavy on his feet, probably drunk or high. 1 woman, trying to stay quiet, probably protecting the child. And the little girl, the one who had somehow gotten his private number and reached across the years to drag him into this nightmare. Through the paper-thin walls, he heard the man's voice, slurred and venomous. "Where's my money, Isabella? You think you can hide from me forever? You think your little guardian angel is coming to save you?" Isabella. The name hit Dominic like a physical blow, bringing with it a flood of memories he had buried so deep he thought they would never surface again. Isabella Martinez, the only woman who had ever made him question whether love was worth the risk. The woman who had vanished from his life without explanation, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a hole in his chest that no amount of power or money had ever filled. The sound of another slap echoed through the door, followed by a child's scream. "Daddy, stop! Please don't hurt Mommy anymore!" Dominic's hand moved to the gun beneath his jacket, muscle memory taking over, but something held him back. The little girl's voice. There was something familiar about it, something that reached into the deepest part of his soul and twisted. He thought about the phone call again, the way she had said his name, not with the fear that most people showed when they spoke to him, but with hope, with trust, like she knew him, like she had been waiting for him to come home. "You came. Mommy said you always keep your promises." What promise? Dominic searched his memory, trying to piece together the fragments of a past he had deliberately forgotten. He remembered Isabella's face the last time he saw her, beautiful even in tears, even as she told him she couldn't be part of his world anymore. She had been scared, but not of him, scared of something else, something she wouldn't tell him about no matter how much he pressed. "I have to go, Dom. I can't explain it, but I have to disappear. Please don't try to find me." But he had tried to find her. For months he had used every resource at his disposal, called in every favor, threatened every contact in his network. Isabella Martinez had simply vanished as if she had never existed. No forwarding address, no family to question, no trace of where she might have gone. Eventually, Dominic had forced himself to stop looking. In his world, people disappeared for only two reasons. Either they were dead, or they didn't want to be found. And if Isabella had chosen to leave him, then he would respect that choice, even if it killed him inside. That had been 8 years ago, 8 years of building walls around his heart, of convincing himself that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. 8 years of telling himself that Isabella had been smart to run, that she had saved herself from the violence and chaos that followed him everywhere. But now she was here, just a few feet away, being beaten by someone who should never have been able to touch her. And there was a little girl who knew his name and trusted him to save her mother. The math was simple. 8 years since Isabella disappeared. A little girl who sounded 7, maybe 8 years old. A little girl who had somehow gotten his private number, the number that only 3 people in the world possessed. Dominic's hand trembled as he reached for the door handle. His mind raced through the possibilities, trying to deny what his heart already knew. But denial was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Not when there was a child on the other side of this door, who might be everything he never knew he wanted. The sounds inside the apartment grew more violent. Glass breaking, furniture overturning, Isabella's voice pleading for mercy that wouldn't come. And then, cutting through it all like a blade, the little girl's voice again, clear and desperate and heartbreaking in its innocence. "Please stop hurting my mommy. She's all I have. If you take her away, I'll be all alone." Something inside Dominic snapped. The careful control he had maintained for 2 decades crumbled like ancient stone. This wasn't about business anymore. This wasn't about territory or respect or any of the things that usually motivated his actions. This was about family. This was about a promise he might have made without even knowing it. This was about a little girl who needed someone to believe in, someone to save her from a world that had already shown her too much darkness. Dominic stepped through the shattered doorframe, his polished leather shoes crunching on broken glass. The apartment was a war zone. Overturned furniture lay scattered across the living room like the aftermath of a hurricane. Family photos hung crooked on the walls, their frames cracked, their glass reflecting the chaos in distorted fragments. But it was the man standing over Isabella that made Dominic's world stop spinning. Vincent Castellano, his former lieutenant, his trusted right hand for over a decade, the man who had saved his life 3 times and whom Dominic had considered closer than blood. Vincent turned slowly, his face a mask of surprise and something else, something that looked almost like relief. Blood stained his knuckles, and his expensive suit was wrinkled from the violence. But it was his eyes that told the real story. They were the eyes of a man who had been waiting for this moment, who had been living in fear of it. "Dom." Vincent's voice carried no surprise, only resignation. I wondered when you'd show up. Isabella lay crumpled against the far wall, her face swollen, her lip bleeding. But her eyes were alert, watching, calculating. When she saw Dominic, something flickered across her features. Not relief, not joy. Something more complicated. Something that looked like guilt. The little girl stepped out from behind an overturned chair. She was small for her age, maybe 7, with dark hair that fell in waves around her shoulders. But it was her eyes that stopped Dominic cold. They were his eyes, the same steel gray that stared back at him from every mirror, the same determined set to her jaw that his mother used to comment on when he was young and stubborn. There was no denying it now. No pretending this was coincidence. This child was his blood. "Hello, Daddy." The little girl's voice was soft but steady, as if she had been practicing the words for years. "Mommy told me all about you." The room fell silent except for the sound of Dominic's heartbeat thundering in his ears. Vincent shifted uncomfortably, his hand moving instinctively toward the gun at his waist. Isabella struggled to sit up, her eyes never leaving Dominic's face. "You have 5 seconds to explain why you're in this apartment putting your hands on my family, Vincent." Dominic's voice was deadly calm, the kind of quiet that preceded explosions. "Before I forget we were ever friends." Vincent laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your family? Dom, you don't even know what family means. You think money and fear make you untouchable, but you've been blind to what's been happening right under your nose." Dominic took a step forward, his hand resting on his gun. Vincent matched the movement, both men falling into the familiar dance of violence they had performed together countless times. But this time, they were on opposite sides. 8 years ago, Vincent continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, Isabella came to me, pregnant, scared, running from you because she knew what kind of life you'd give her child, what kind of world you'd drag an innocent kid into. The words hit Dominic like physical blows. He looked at Isabella, searching her face for confirmation or denial. She met his gaze but said nothing, her silence more damning than any accusation. "So she asked me to protect her," Vincent went on, "to help her disappear, to make sure you never found them. And I did. For 8 years. I kept them safe from your world, from your violence, from your poison. But you couldn't stay away, could you?" Dominic's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of betrayal that went deeper than business, deeper than money or territory. "You couldn't just protect them and walk away. You had to claim them for yourself." Vincent's mask slipped, revealing the desperation underneath. "She was never yours, Dom. She chose to leave you. She chose me. And Sophia," he gestured toward the little girl, "deserves better than a father who kills people for a living." The little girl, Sophia, stepped forward. Her small voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Uncle Vincent, you promised you wouldn't hurt Mommy anymore. You promised if I was good, you'd stop hitting her." The truth crashed over Dominic in waves. This wasn't about protection. This wasn't about love or family or keeping his daughter safe from his world. This was about possession, about a man who had taken everything Dominic cared about and twisted it into something dark and controlling. Vincent's face flushed red. "The kid doesn't understand the situation, Dom. Isabella's been filling her head with stories about you, making her think you're some kind of hero instead of the monster you really are." Isabella finally spoke, her voice hoarse but determined. "Vincent, stop, please. She doesn't need to hear this." But Sophia stepped closer to Dominic, her small hand reaching for his. She looked up at him with those gray eyes that mirrored his own, and in that moment, he saw something that broke his heart and rebuilt it at the same time. She saw hope where everyone else saw danger. She saw a father where everyone else saw a killer. "I've been waiting for you," she whispered. "Mommy told me you were busy protecting other people, but that someday you'd come home to protect us, too." Dominic knelt down to her level, his massive frame dwarfed by the enormity of what this moment meant. "Sweetheart, I'm here now, and I promise you, no one is ever going to hurt you or your mother again." Vincent raised his gun, his hand trembling with rage and desperation. "You're not taking them from me, Dom. I've invested too much time, too much of my life in keeping them safe. I won't let you destroy what we've built." But as Vincent spoke, Dominic noticed something else. Sophia wasn't afraid of the gun. She was watching Vincent with the calculated gaze of someone far older than her years. This wasn't the first time she had seen him lose control. This wasn't the first time violence had filled this apartment. "How long has this been going on?" Dominic asked Isabella, his voice gentle despite the fury building inside him. "How long has he been hurting you?" Isabella looked away, shame and fear warring across her bruised features. "It started about a year ago, when Sophia began asking more questions about you. Vincent said it was dangerous to let her be curious, that he needed to discipline both of us to keep us safe." The words hung in the air like poison. Dominic felt something inside him snap, the last thread of restraint that had been holding his rage in check. Vincent had taken his family, isolated them, convinced them they needed his protection, and then turned that protection into a prison. This wasn't love. This wasn't safety. This was abuse wrapped in the lie of protection. "Vincent," Dominic said, rising to his full height. His voice carried the weight of 20 years of violence, of decisions that had shaped the criminal underworld of 3 cities. "You have 10 seconds to put down that gun and walk away. 10 seconds to disappear from their lives forever." Vincent's laugh was wild, unhinged. "Or what, Dom? You'll kill me? In front of your precious daughter? Show her exactly what kind of monster her father really is?" Sophia tugged on Dominic's jacket, her small voice cutting through the standoff. "Daddy," she said, the words still strange and wonderful on her lips. "Uncle Vincent has a gun in the kitchen too, behind the cookie jar. And there's another one in Mommy's bedroom. He hides them everywhere so we can't ever feel safe." The clinical way she delivered this information, the matter-of-fact tone of a child who had learned to catalog threats for survival, told Dominic everything he needed to know about the last 8 years. This wasn't protection. This was psychological warfare waged against a woman and child who had nowhere else to run. Vincent's face went pale as he realized what Sophia had revealed, how completely she had been watching, learning, preparing for this moment when someone might finally come to save them. Dominic's mind raced as he processed what his daughter had just revealed. The casual way Sophia cataloged Vincent's hidden weapons, the methodical precision of her observations, told him everything about the nightmare these two had been living. This child had been forced to become a strategist for her own survival, mapping escape routes and potential threats in what should have been her safe haven. Vincent's grip tightened on his gun, his knuckles white with desperation. "You don't understand, Dom. They need structure, discipline." Isabella was letting the kid run wild, filling her head with fairy tales about a father who abandoned them. Abandoned them? Dominic's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "Vincent, I spent 2 years searching for them. 2 years turning over every stone, calling in every favor, threatening every contact I had. They didn't just disappear. Someone helped them vanish." The truth settled over the room like thick smoke. Isabella's face crumpled as the weight of 8 years of deception finally broke through. Vincent had orchestrated everything: the disappearance, the new identities, the carefully constructed lie that Dominic had chosen his criminal empire over his family. Isabella's voice was barely audible. "Vincent told me you didn't want us, that you said a child would make you weak in your business. He showed me photos of you with other women, told me you were relieved we were gone." The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. Vincent had isolated Isabella completely, cut her off from anyone who might have told her the truth, then positioned himself as her only protector, while systematically destroying her self-worth and agency. Sophia stepped closer to Dominic, her small hand sliding into his massive palm. Her touch was electric, connecting him to a part of himself he had buried so deep he thought it was dead. "Daddy," she said quietly, "Mommy cries at night sometimes. She looks at a picture of you and tells it she's sorry. Vincent's composure cracked completely. 8 years. 8 years I've kept them safe from your world. Do you know what it's like watching over people who can never fully appreciate the sacrifices you make? Do you know how hard it is to love someone who's always looking over your shoulder for someone else? The confession hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Vincent hadn't been protecting them out of loyalty or friendship. He had been protecting his investment, his claim on something that had never belonged to him. The beatings, the psychological control, the systematic isolation, all of it designed to break Isabella down until she had no choice but to depend on him completely. But children see things adults miss, and Sophia had been watching, learning, waiting for her moment. She had somehow found Dominic's private number, the one Vincent himself had given her mother years ago for emergencies. She had called the one person who could end her nightmare, even though she had never met him face to face. "How did you know to call me, sweetheart?" Dominic asked gently, never taking his eyes off Vincent's gun. Sophia's answer came with the matter-of-fact delivery that broke his heart. "Mommy keeps your number written inside her jewelry box. She told me if something really bad ever happened, if Uncle Vincent ever scared her so much she couldn't think straight, I should call that number and ask for help. She said you would always answer, even if you were busy." The jewelry box. Dominic remembered giving Isabella that small wooden box for her birthday, months before she disappeared. Inside, she had kept the few pieces of jewelry he had bought her. Nothing flashy or expensive because she had always preferred simple things. He had engraved his private number inside the lid as a romantic gesture, telling her it was her direct line to his heart. She had carried that number for 8 years, through Vincent's manipulation, through the beatings, through the slow erosion of her spirit. She had kept that connection alive. Not for herself, but for their daughter. Vincent's face twisted with rage as he realized how completely his control had been undermined. "You poisoned her against me," he snarled at Isabella. "All these years you've been planning this, waiting for your chance to betray everything I've done for you." Isabella struggled to her feet, using the wall for support. Her movements were careful, practiced, the motions of someone who had learned to hide pain. "No, Vincent, I never planned anything. I just tried to survive each day and protect my daughter from the truth about what you really are." The truth was becoming clearer with each revelation. Vincent hadn't just taken Isabella and Sophia, he had imprisoned them in a carefully constructed lie, convincing Isabella that she was protecting her daughter from Dominic's dangerous world, while subjecting them both to something far worse. At least Dominic's violence had rules, boundaries, a code of honor. Vincent's cruelty was personal, intimate, designed to destroy rather than protect. Sophia squeezed Dominic's hand tighter. "Are you really going to take us away from here?" Her question carried the weight of 8 years of broken promises, of hope deferred until it almost died. "Yes, baby girl." Dominic's voice was steady, certain. "We're going to leave here together, all 3 of us, and Vincent is never going to hurt you or your mother again." Vincent raised the gun higher, his desperation making him increasingly dangerous. "You think you can just walk in here and take my family? You think your money and your reputation mean anything to me now? Your family?" Isabella's voice cut through Vincent's delusion like a blade. "Vincent, look at what you've done to us. Look at my face. Look at how my daughter flinches every time you raise your voice. This isn't love. This isn't family. This is ownership." The apartment fell silent except for the distant sounds of the city beyond the broken windows. Police sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, but they seemed like echoes from another world. In this moment, in this room, there were only 4 people and 8 years of lies finally coming to light. Vincent's hand trembled as he held the gun. His carefully constructed world was crumbling around him, and Dominic could see the exact moment when desperation shifted into something more dangerous. The moment when a man with nothing left to lose decides to destroy everything he can't possess. "Dom, you want to know the truth?" Vincent's voice took on a manic edge. "The whole truth about why Isabella really left you." Dominic felt Sophia tense beside him, her small body going rigid with fear. Whatever Vincent was about to reveal, she knew it would hurt. Children always know when the adults in their lives are about to shatter something precious. She was pregnant when she left, Vincent continued, his words coming faster now, fueled by rage and desperation. But not just pregnant. She was terrified. Terrified of what you'd become, what you'd do to anyone who tried to take her from you. She'd seen what happened to the Moretti family when they crossed you. Whole bloodlines erased because someone looked at your territory the wrong way. The memories hit Dominic like physical blows. The Moretti incident had been brutal, even by his standards, but it had been business, a message that needed sending. He had never considered how Isabella might have interpreted his actions, how they might have looked to someone who loved him but feared what he was capable of. She came to me crying, Vincent went on, his voice gaining strength from Dominic's silence, begging me to help her disappear before you found out about the baby. She said she couldn't bear to watch you turn your own child into a weapon, couldn't stand the thought of your enemies using her baby to get to you. Isabella's face had gone pale, but she didn't deny Vincent's words. The truth was more complex than simple manipulation. She had made a choice, the hardest choice a woman in love could make. She had chosen to protect their unborn child from the world she feared that child would inherit. But you couldn't just help her disappear and walk away, could you, Vincent? Dominic's voice carried 8 years of betrayal, 8 years of questions finally getting answers. You had to make yourself indispensable. You had to make sure she never felt strong enough to leave you, too. Vincent's mask slipped completely. She needed someone who could protect them without destroying them. Someone who understood family meant more than power and fear and respect earned through violence. Sophia stepped forward, her young voice cutting through the adult rage and recrimination. Uncle Vincent, you hurt Mommy more than Daddy ever could. At least Daddy's enemies know he's dangerous. You pretended to be safe. The simple truth from a child's lips silenced both men. Sophia had identified what all the adults had missed. Honest danger was preferable to dishonest protection. Vincent had been more destructive than any enemy because he had operated from within their trust, using love as a weapon more effectively than any gun. Dominic looked at Isabella, really looked at her for the first time since entering the apartment. Beyond the bruises and the fear, he could see the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. But he could also see the strength she had developed, the fierce protectiveness that had kept their daughter alive and relatively whole through 8 years of psychological warfare. Isabella, he said quietly, ignoring Vincent's gun completely. I understand why you left. I understand why you were afraid. But I need you to understand something too. I would have changed everything for you, for her. There's nothing in my world more important than family. Isabella's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. I know that now. But 8 years ago I was 22 and terrified and pregnant with a child whose father commanded armies of dangerous men. Vincent made it seem like disappearing was the only way to keep her safe. And maybe it was, at the time. Dominic acknowledged. But that time is over now. Vincent has shown you what false protection looks like. Are you ready to trust me with the real thing? Before Isabella could answer, Vincent stepped closer, his desperation making him reckless. Nobody's going anywhere. You think I'm going to let you walk out of here and take everything I've built? Everything I've sacrificed for? Sophia moved faster than anyone expected. Her small body darted toward the kitchen, while Vincent's attention was focused on Dominic and Isabella. She returned seconds later with something that made all 3 adults freeze. Vincent's backup gun, the one he had hidden behind the cookie jar, the one he thought a 7-year-old girl would never dare to touch. Uncle Vincent, Sophia said, her voice surprisingly calm for a child holding a loaded weapon. You taught me gun safety, remember? You said I should always know where the weapons were in case of emergencies. The gun looked enormous in her small hands, but she held it with the careful respect Vincent had drilled into her during his paranoid security lessons. She wasn't pointing it at anyone, but the message was clear. The balance of power in the room had shifted completely. Vincent's face went white. Sophia, sweetheart, give me the gun. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand perfectly, Sophia replied. You're going to hurt Mommy again. You're going to try to stop Daddy from taking us somewhere safe. And I'm not going to let that happen anymore. The child's composure was terrifying in its completeness. This wasn't a scared little girl acting on impulse. This was someone who had been planning this moment, waiting for the right opportunity to take control of her own fate. Dominic felt a surge of pride mixed with heartbreak. His daughter had inherited his strategic mind, his ability to assess threats and act decisively, but she had been forced to develop these skills as survival mechanisms, not advantages in business or life. Sophia, baby, Dominic said gently, keeping his voice calm and steady. Can you hand me that gun? I promise I'll keep you and Mommy safe without it. Sophia looked at him with those steel-gray eyes that mirrored his own. Will you promise something else too, Daddy? Will you promise that Uncle Vincent won't be able to find us wherever we go next? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia wasn't just asking for protection. She was asking for justice. She was asking for the assurance that Vincent would never again be in a position to hurt them or anyone else. Dominic looked at Vincent, seeing him clearly for the first time in 20 years. Not the loyal lieutenant who had saved his life. Not the trusted friend who had stood by him through wars and territory disputes. Just a man who had used love as a weapon against the innocent. Yes, sweetheart, Dominic said, never taking his eyes off Vincent. I promise you that Vincent will never hurt anyone ever again. Sophia carefully handed the gun to her father, and in that moment, something shifted forever. The little girl who had been forced to grow up too fast finally allowed herself to be a child again. Vincent's reign of terror ended not with violence, but with the quiet courage of a 7-year-old who refused to let fear win. 6 months later, Dominic watched from the kitchen window as Sophia played in their new backyard, her laughter echoing through the safe walls of their home. Isabella stood beside him, her bruises long healed, her smile returning day by day. Vincent had vanished completely, his organization dismantled, his threats neutralized forever. The phone call that interrupted a negotiation had given Dominic something worth more than any territory or respect. It had given him his family. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power to change everything. Sometimes a child's courage can save everyone, and sometimes the most dangerous man in the city discovers that his greatest strength was never his ability to destroy, but his capacity to protect the ones he loves.